Join Drs. Savanah Craig and Ronnetta Sartor as we navigate life beyond graduation. Real conversations about forging our own paths in our early years, in our careers. There's a reason it's called practicing dentistry. All right, so this week's topic is a difficult one, talking about owning your mistakes, or even just things that didn't go the way you had hoped. What thoughts?
It's a great topic. I think it's funny because you said, did you say this one's a hard one?
Yeah.
So for me, I think this one is an easy one.
Ooh.
Because I try to lead with honesty and vulnerability. And so with my team, and even when I was an associate, if I did something wrong,
yeah,
I was the first to say, hey, I apologize, especially like to my team, I apologize.
Yeah.
This is what I did and this is how it could have been better. Because the way I see it, it's a way for us to learn, and it's a way to show your team that you're human too, and you do make mistakes, and it's a way for them to also see that you're holding yourself accountable, and it helps them to be held accountable when things go wrong as well. Because this is a loaded topic, but from a patient perspective, owning mistakes, or I think it's loaded because over time, I have learned that just because something did not work from a dental perspective does not mean that it's my mistake.
Yeah.
It could mean that the dentistry failed.
Right.
But part of it is figuring out why the dentistry failed and expressing that to the patient. And if it can be something to do that we could do to improve it, explaining to them how we can improve it and make it better for the next time.
Yeah.
And I think what makes that easier is a conversation that I like to have with all of my patients when we're talking about doing anything in their mouth. Like, I cannot create something that's better than what God gave you, know? And so, anything that we do in dentistry, even if it's the best quality product, it's going to need some sort of maintenance or possibly a redo in the future.
Yeah.
Nothing is infinite or gonna last forever. And I think going into it with patients, and it's the same thing for like patients that have like medical devices, like patients that have knee replacements and pacemakers and that sort of thing. All of those things require maintenance, and letting patients know that in dentistry things require maintenance too. Just because we take all of your teeth out and give you dentures still doesn't mean that you never have to see the dentist again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me why your thought process and your first thought was that owning your mistakes is hard.
I think because I hate the word, but I'm a perfectionist. And so like I don't have a hard time admitting that I've made a mistake, but I will beat myself up about it forever. Forever. And so I think I think just admitting that I make mistakes period is not my favorite thing. That's a conversation beyond dentistry.
It brings up a great point though, and I think early on I carried that weight so much until now I'm in a place where I just can't.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I don't think about it. Like I will think about it, but part of it's got to be, okay, it's time for me to let this go and learn from it.
Yeah.
And so it's just like failures, like, okay, that didn't work. But if things worked all the time, then we would never learn.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, what can I learn from it? And part of it for me was like a mentality switch.
Yes.
Like, okay, I I didn't like, yes, it didn't go how I wanted to go, but it it allowed me the opportunity to learn from it and grow from it and be better because of it. And
Yeah.
if it hadn't happened, then I wouldn't have had those opportunities.
Yeah. That's a good point. I I think part of it for me is just like I feel so bad for the people that had to be there with me in the learning experience, but like I just need to remind myself like no one else is actually thinking about this as much as I'm thinking about this.
I think that brings up another great point, though. Like, because if people are with you along that learning experience,
Mhm.
then they're learning as well. And you guys are
Yeah.
growing together.
Yeah.
And so that's the beauty in it.
Yeah.
Like, that you're not, and it's why we created this podcast, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Because you're not in it alone. It's the practice of dentistry. Like, we're going to learn each day. But if we don't have mistakes or fail, then how do we learn?
Yeah.
And how do we grow? And how do we be better together? It's the same thing we say about mentorship, right? Like, our
Mhm.
mentors tell us all the time, hey, this is what I did wrong.
Yeah.
Don't be like me, be better than me, right? But if they hadn't gone through that and we didn't have that insight to be like, okay, well, I've heard this before. Maybe I should, you know, do something a little bit different, then, you know, maybe we wouldn't.
Yeah. Those who came before me
Right.
made this mistake. Yeah. I think it's also an opportunity like you said to grow with your team, with your you know, I think it's also all about how you present it to the people in your life and like you said humility and honesty and even when people are upset that it didn't go the way they wanted it or whatever. I think at the end of the day if you're more upfront about it and honest about, hey, I'm upset that this didn't go the way we thought we were going to go either, but let's make a plan forward. Can be hard.
I think part of it too is like, whether you're an owner, an associate, or, wherever you are in your dental career, if from the beginning you let your team know that, hey, I don't have all of the answers.
Yeah.
I don't have all of the answers. And some of this stuff we're going to figure out together, and
Yeah.
we'll be on a journey together and we'll learn together. I think that creates a space of, like you said, humility, and it allows for the opportunity for growth. And I was listening to a Peloton guy, Alex Tucson,
Okay.
and he was saying how when he was younger, he felt from his upbringing that he was not supposed to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And as he got older, he realized that through failing, that was his way of growing and learning and, being better. And because he was scared to fail, he just wouldn't even attempt anything when he was younger. And
That's
so
a
that
really good
brings,
point.
right, it brings a great point. Like, if you are so scared to fail that you don't even attempt it, how do you grow? How do you learn?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. And you're not gonna live to your fullest potential because you were so scared to even try.
Right.
How do you handle that more with patients? We've talked a lot about your team, but all right, we're both young female doctors, and there's some added level of hoops to jump through, I guess would be the best way to.
I think a lot of times it starts from whenever we first start talking about what the diagnosis is
Mm-hmm.
and treatment options.
Okay.
Um, I like to, let patients know what their treatment options are. And then within reason, I say within reason, meaning not to overwhelm them, but let them know what the risks and benefits are of those treatment options.
Yeah.
And so if from day one, they know, okay, well, if you do a bridge versus an implant, these are complications that we could possibly foresee, then we've had that discussion. And if things become not what we want it to be, then it's not so much that it was a mistake,
Yeah.
is more so, well, we knew that this could have been a complication,
Yeah.
or we knew that this was a possibility of failure, and now this is how we move forward.
Yeah. And I
So,
think what do they always say? Like, if you wait till after the fact, it's an excuse. Like in the beginning, it's informing them. After the
mhm,
fact, it's an excuse.
right. And I just try to make a point of, on the front end, letting
Yeah.
them know, like, even if it's a tooth that, is borderline, like this tooth might need a root canal, I
Yep.
try to let them know before we even touch the tooth and say, hey, look at this image. You
Yeah.
see where we're starting. This is where we're starting. And that's the beauty of technology and dentistry. You can take a radiograph, you can take an intraoral photo, you can take an intraoral scan, and the same numbers don't lie, photos don't lie either. Like, if
Yeah.
you, well, sometimes it can be, deeper than what we think, but
Mm-hmm.
most of the time it's not more shallow. If anything, it might be worse than what we're anticipating.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is, fully informing and co-diagnosing with patients too. I think that's pretty important. Like, if you have a photo of what the tooth looked like on the screen, and the patient asks you, hey, what's going on with that, how do we fix it, or I think those things help as well.
Yeah. That's a good point. Um, yeah, I think for some reason there's just this idea that dentistry will last forever for some reason. And like you said, just I can't do better than what you started with. And
And I
obviously
think,
that didn't last either.
right, and I think that goes back to, comprehensive and complete care dentistry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the whole body and masticatory system together, right? It's the overall health, it's the joints, it's the teeth, it's everything else in between, and having that conversation with patients as well. If a patient has acid reflux and they also are diabetic and they also are on a lot of medications that causes dry mouth, that's going to complicate treatment in a way that wouldn't if a patient did not have those comorbidities.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah, I think I mean, obviously between associateship, residency, now owner, you've worked with like a lot of different personalities. And have you seen, I don't know, I think sometimes team members can be not used to that honest, humble environment that you're creating. How has that sort of impacted your team environment?
I think it's I think it has helped
Mm-hmm.
to humanize me as a
Yeah.
doctor, because
Yeah.
sometimes, like, you know people, including our team, they're like, oh, okay, they're a doctor, they're supposed to have all the answers,
Yeah.
they're supposed to be the expert. But it, as it applies to patients and the team, sometimes I don't know the answers and I have to go find them
Yeah.
to the best of my ability, or I
Yep.
have to contact someone that's stronger than me in that area, or who might be an expert in that area,
Yeah.
and ask them. I think from a standpoint in terms of building a culture that is a very humble culture, and one where we are all striving for better. For me, it's important that if you're a part of this team and the leader of your team is behaving and performing in this way, the same expectations go for you too. Because I would not ask you to do something that I'm not willing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm coachable and I am holding myself accountable and I'm asking that you guys, as my team, hold me accountable,
Yeah.
then I expect you to be coachable and you to own your mistakes and hold yourself accountable too. And also, as a team, we hold each other accountable
Yeah.
so that together we can provide the best care and service for our patients.
That
What's your
makes a lot
take
of
on it?
sense.
How would you answer that question?
No, I think that's, you've said it all, sort of leading by example. And I think actions speak louder than words, which is sort of what you're alluding to as far as building that culture. Um, and I think I've tried to, even though I hate, I wish just everything was exactly how it should be, but that's literally not dentistry. Um, I think by sort of spinning it as a positive of like when my colleagues at work who have been practicing longer than me will be like, hey, maybe consider putting your treatment plan in this order, or, giving me little tips and tricks. And sometimes my team will be like, not shocked, but just like concerned that that could be upsetting to me. And I'm like, no, 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 like this is a positive experience. I'm here for mentorship and to grow. And so I think them seeing me get, like you said, be coachable, has now allowed them to know when I come to them with something like, hey, next time, could we do it this way? It's not me like being nitpicky or talking down to them. It's making it a positive of, we're just trying to make this a better experience for the patient, for all of us, and make it run more efficiently. So I've seen that in some ways of them watching me get feedback or get coached has made them more open to that from me. So that's been cool.
I think this all brings up a good point because I know some offices will do like the DISC
Mm-hmm.
assessments and personality assessments. And from those, we all know that we all have different personalities, and there are some personalities that are going to be more easier to coach and more easier to hold other people and themselves accountable as opposed to others. I know you've done some of those assessments. What's your take on that and how it applies to like owning your mistakes and accountability?
Yeah, I think I like knowing my own personality type. I'm not super good yet at understanding other people's in like the way I need to communicate with them. The whole treat others as you want to be treated, but it's more treat others how they want to be treated. I tend to treat them, give them information in the way that I want to receive information. And so I've been trying to work on that of like understanding more what they need from me and how they need me to deliver it than uh, pulling more from their strengths than my strengths. And I think that's a real challenge because people are all very different.
I think that's a great perspective and a great note to end it on. Like at the end of the day, owning our mistakes and being held accountable. The most important part of that is communicating effectively
Yeah.
in a way that whoever you're talking
Yep.
to, whether it's your team or your patients, actually hear you and understand and acknowledge what's being said.
Yeah. Yeah. Checking in to make sure that the communication is landing effectively.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Beyond Graduation. If you enjoyed this week's episode, be sure to share it with a friend. Connect with us on social media at Savanah Craig DDS and at Dr_Sartor. And remember, you are not alone on this journey.
This episode was sponsored by the Dental Residency Guide and the Beyond Graduation ebooks. These ebooks can be found at ignitedds.com/ebooks.
Thank you so much for listening to Beyond Graduation, brought to you by Ignite DDS and Future Dentists.